Welcome to week 3 of our devotional series, Experience Jesus, where we're teaching you the foundations of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, with the hopes that you will take these principles and go and make disciples. In week 1, we talked about what it means to look to Jesus, and we shared simple definitions and answered questions like, what is a disciple? What is the gospel? And what is the church? Then in week 2, we discussed what it means to live like Jesus, and we shared 4 practices of Jesus that we're called to practice as well today. Now, as we jump into week 3, we're going to share what it means to love like Jesus. Today's passage comes from Mark chapter 12, verse 30 and 31. Jesus was asked the question, which is the greatest command? And his reply gives us a foundation for what it means to love like Jesus loved. In Mark chapter 12, verse 30 and 31, Jesus said this, "And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbors as yourself. There are no other commandment greater than these." Within this verse, you see 2 types of relationship. First, you see the vertical relationship with God, and second, you see the horizontal relationship with people. When we are called to love God, the idea of loving Him involves all that we are. And that's why in that passage we see to love God with all your mind, really with all your soul, with all your heart, and all of your strength. To love God is to love Him not partially, but fully. Just as when you go ziplining, you can't kind of zipline. In the same way, you can't kind of love God. You are called to love Him with all that you are. And when your vertical relationship with God is right, so will your horizontal relationship with people be right. When Jesus said the second is like this, He was giving equal weight. In other words, to love people is as valuable as loving God. You need both in your life to be a follower of Jesus and to love as Jesus loved. In fact, in John chapter 13, verse 34 and 35, Jesus told His disciples to love one another as He has loved us. And then in the same description of what I just shared with you in Mark, in Matthew's account, in Matthew 22, verse 40, he actually goes on to say that it's upon these 2 commandments hangs all of the law of the prophets. In other words, he's saying all of Scripture, all of the commands can be hung on the commands to love God and to love others. When I first got married and we moved into our first apartment, we had the fun of trying to hang different pictures throughout our house. Now, I'm not exactly what you would call handy, and so I just started putting nails into the wall, and that worked at first for picture frames. But when I tried to hang a heavy mirror, it kept falling to the ground, and I kept getting frustrated. I realized in that moment that you need to anchor heavier things into the studs of the wall. When Jesus says that the greatest command is to love Him and to love others, those 2 things represent anchors or studs from which all of Scripture is hung. So if you're going to summarize what it means to be a follower of Jesus, it can be summed up in the vertical relationship with God and the horizontal relationship with others. In your vertical relationship with God, you love Him with all that you are. And in your horizontal relationship with others, you love people the way that Jesus loved us. We need both to love like Jesus, and I hope you'll start putting these into practice in your everyday life.